Yeah, so hello everyone from our side and welcome to our session Eat the World and Eat Up. I really hope you took the chance to have a snack and more importantly that you didn't leave anything on the plates because we shouldn't waste anything as you'll learn in this panel. And I'm very pleased to discuss the topic of food waste, especially in China, with three excellent experts today. Here with me, and please apologize if I mispronounce anything wrong, are three excellent experts. We have Ms. Lorna Tsai. She's the co-founder of the Circular with the aim of launching a transnational community focused on circular economies and sustainability. She also co-founded ZURICH. I really hope I pronounced that correctly. That is a platform similar to the Swiss app Too Good To Go. And we have Mr. Richard Brubaker. He's a professor for sustainability and social innovation at the Southern Methodist University. Sorry. And he's the founder and managing director of Collective Responsibility. And then I also hope that we can welcome Ms. Deborah Yi Wen Lee. She's Plant Forward chef educator and also key initiator for many global food education programs. I think at the moment she's not connected yet, but I hope that this will change during my few basic introduction info. Because before I hand over the stage to our experts for a brief presentation of their fields of work, I will give you some very basic info on the topic of food waste and especially on the topic of food waste in China. Food waste refers, according to the UN, to the decrease in the quantity or quality of food resulting from decisions and actions by retailers, food service providers and consumers. And to give you an example of food waste in China, China wastes about 50 million tons of grain annually, and these 50 millions account for about 1/10 of their annual grain production. It is also estimated that enough food to feed between 30 and 50 million people goes to waste in China every year. And there are also already several actions underway to combat food waste in China. For example, in 2019, the city of Shanghai introduced severe regulations forcing individuals and companies to correctly recycle their food waste. And this Shanghai model has since been introduced in other cities in China. In 2020, Xi Jinping launched, for one thing, a Clean Plate campaign, and he also urged a sense of crisis regarding to food waste. In April of this year, a law went into effect in China that is designed to combat food waste. The law allows restaurants to collect the garbage disposal fee from customers who leave too much food on their plate, and it also includes fines for restaurants that encourage customers to give up excessive orders. So, but enough talking from my side for now. I now give the stage to our first expert to give us some insight on his field of work. I welcome Mr. Brubaker. The floor is yours.
Wish I could be there with you guys. I hope I'm coming through clearly. We have to be on a VPN for Teams, so it's a little bit of a challenge. So my name is Richard Brubaker, and I'm founder of Collective Responsibility. And basically the work that I do is surrounding urban. One of the biggest drivers of this is just the fact that as we're urbanizing, and particularly in Asia, as we're growing wealthy in the cities, we're seeing urban consumption and changing consumer habits change dramatically. So if I look at like 1980, 1985 Chinese, on average, they ate about 14 to 16 kilograms of pork a year per person. Now they're eating roughly about 65 to 70 kilograms a year. And that's not because in rural China they're eating more. It's really because in the city they're eating significantly more, while in the rural it's staying the same. So that average is just being brought up. Then the second thing is the globalization of food. You know, as the regions, it doesn't matter if it's Asia, North America, South America, Africa, Europe, as they're globalizing, as their people are urbanizing, and as their wealth is being generated, the globalization of food is now happening as well. I mean, we used to eat almost entirely local. Shanghai, about 80% of our food came from within about 150 to 100 kilometers radius, you know, from our city. But now we're eating avocados from Mexico and Chile. We're importing soy from America, Brazil. We're bringing in, you know, grains from Australia. Like, we are truly a global supply chain now. And that supply chain is really, you know, as we're seeing now, struggled to keep up with that growth, but also struggled to find sustainability in terms of waste and loss along the supply chain. Now, the good thing is that for as consumers, these two factors, when they came together, they provided deflationary pricing pressure. So they basically made food cheaper. And what that meant was, honestly, the cost of waste to us individually was almost nothing. Like, we never thought about we're leaving a salad on the plate or we're leaving chicken on the plate. Like, maybe we didn't waste steak or a few of the higher end items like a lobster, but for the most part, we didn't really value our food because it was coming in so cheap and in ways that we just didn't have access to for many years. Now, the reality is, like, all of that is allowed to happen because the inefficiencies at the end of the day of the supply chain are largely borne by the farmer themselves. The exploitative practices around water, pesticides, refrigeration, all these things, all these wastes are largely, you know, paid for by the farmer, or in the terms of waste, by our cities or by our waterways where this waste goes out. Now, in many developing nations, what you'll find is that waste will kind of be, you know, brought together and then sent out to feed the animals outside the city, which becomes a food safety issue. So we definitely want to control that. And in reference to the Shanghai city regulation that was drawn up, this was one of the major reasons why they were trying to tackle food waste. Yes, they wanted to, you know, improve food security. Yes, they want to stabilize economics, but they also want to make food more secure and safe for its populations. Now, all that sounds kind of either complicated, or for some of you are probably thinking, well, it's too hard to fix. But the reality is, what we're seeing is the shifts to a more sustainable, more resilient, less wasteful system. They're not overly complicated. Like, we know how to make progress in a lot of big areas. And so, yes, while we're wasting about 10% of our grains, we're wasting up to about 60% of our greens and our bananas, which many of you, I'm sure, allow sit on your counter way too long. Well, there's a few things that we're seeing already that are changing this. And the first one is awareness, whether it's in China, in Asia, or global. Awareness around food and food waste has grown at a rate that's very high. And now it's a regular conversation in the agricultural world, in the brand world, in, you know, the consumer world when it comes to environmentalism and sustainability. And as we're seeing, it could be through climate change reasons, or you're a vegan, or you're a minimalist, you know, buying and only what you need, or buying whole foods that are local. This is becoming more and more kind of trendy. And as that's happening, as diets are changing, there's less waste. It's less environmentally intensive, and that's a good thing. The second major thing I think that's happening is the economics of food is changing. And I know, like, this may sound, you know, difficult for a lot of people who don't have access to food or freely, you know, affordable food, but for many of the urban centers in Asia and in the world, you have a very large consumer class that really didn't pay the full price of food. Like, they were very fortunate. They could afford whatever they want. But again, as you're seeing over the last 18 months, currently in the last 3 months, the price of food, be it animal-based proteins, or in China right now, it's spinach and broccoli actually costs more than pork. The economics are getting more and more expensive because those easy gains, those easy deflationary pressures, they're being relaxed. The supply chain is disrupted. The environment is disrupted. Water, is being disrupted. Climate change is affecting, everything. And a lot of farmers are moving off the farm. So it's getting harder to deliver cheaply. So when it gets more expensive, guess what? We eat less, we eat more local, we eat more whole foods, we eat less protein. And again, that's another way to also have a huge impact when it comes to food waste and food loss as well. And then the last one is innovations. Honestly, I think this is where I think things get really interesting, particularly if you're young and you're trying to figure out how to hack the system. You have a lot of areas in terms of on the farm when it comes to yields and improving yields through robots, through all kinds of technologies, but also in reducing food. We're reducing food waste. We're seeing amazing advances in refrigeration, packaging, logistics, and then in the restaurants themselves, because the cost of food is going up, you're seeing restaurants and kitchens innovate how they store food, how they prepare food, how they order food, but also how they tell consumers what is or isn't enough. They have a lot of data. They can, innovate around that. And then, yes, plant-based proteins, also huge innovations, much less wasteful. And because you're paying a valuable product, you're much less likely to waste the food that you put on your plate or that you order online. And so for me, what I find is we're in a huge transition where we're moving to a much more urban, much more affordable lifestyle where globalization has delivered a variety of food that we've never had before. We're going to struggle to maintain that system if we don't value the food, if we're not aware of the food, if we're not paying full price, and if we're not realizing that local food or locally sourced food has its place as well. It can't just be a global supply chain. And so for me, be it speaking with individuals like yourself or working with ag banks or working with big brands, we're seeing a lot of progress on these challenges. And so for me, I really look forward to engaging with you on the questions to kind of dive a little bit deeper maybe into your own concerns, your own applications. But for me, these are kind of the 3 or 4 mega trends that are pushing us towards a challenging supply chain, but also the 2 or 3 things I think that really allow for quick gains to happen when we have these issues of food waste and food loss through our system. So thank you very much. Appreciate the invitation, and I look forward to the remainder of the event.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you very much for your very dense and very insightful short presentation. I now give
Nutritional pack.
I now give the floor to Lorna.
Hi, I'm Lorna. Greetings from Shanghai, China. And thanks, Philipp, for the introduction. I have to say your pronunciation is perfect. Not sure if you have learned Chinese before. Yeah, I still can't see the slide. Okay. Cool. Yeah, this year we just launched a program called "兜着走." In Chinese, there's a saying called 吃不了兜着走, which means if you cannot finish the food, you pack it and you take it away, so you won't leave any food waste. And here's our cute logo, and the cat's name is Mimi, and she's our ambassador for the mini program. So here are some food waste background in China. Like for me, I was born in the 90s. There's no food shortage for my generation, but because of the development of the internet and also the user experience of all the apps is so good, and the takeaway industries in China, everything is so easy. You can order food just by tapping on your phone. But there are huge food waste problem in China, as you can see by all the numbers. And dealing with the food waste can give a lot of carbon emission. So that's why we want to solve the problems through our mini app. There are also policy concerns, as just mentioned by Philipp. The anti-food waste law was just launched this year. So what we really want to do with the mini app is to provide sustainable solutions to both business and consumers to fight food waste together in China. The business win by giving out their leftover food, and so they can have less economic loss. The consumers win because they can buy cheaper food and save food waste. So together we can reduce the environmental impacts of food waste in China. Oh, I forgot to say next page, sorry. Next page. Next page, please. Next page. Oh, and next page, sorry. Yeah, so there are solutions in your country like Too Good To Go or Karma, but there's no solution similar. There's no similar solutions in China, so that's why we want to try it out in China. Next slide, please. Okay, here on this page, I want to mention that we chose to build a mini app in WeChat rather than developing an app from scratch, because it costs a lot. And here in China, the WeChat is a super app where people can connect easily. So we chose to develop a mini app. Here on the mini app, people can find out which stores are giving out their food with discount nearby, and they can go to pick up the food and help save the food waste. Next slide, please. That's how our mini app looks like. The app is mainly all the locations are in Shanghai, like bakeries, cafes, and also restaurants. And people in Shanghai can just go to the stores and reserve it, pay less money, and to reserve the food. And they also get credits, like we call it green food points in our mini program, so they can also use the points later on. Next slide, please. Oh, because we just started this year, we also offer enterprise level solutions. Unfortunately, a lot of enterprise reach out to us. Those people know their core business, but mainly from the marketing and PR team. They want to collaborate with us for more sustainable branding, to build a more sustainable branding for them. But for the companies, they really want to solve the waste problem solutions. We also give them consulting service and help them to deal with their leftover food or surplus food wisely. Next slide, please. Here are some examples. Like we partner with several brands in Shanghai, and Chaimido is one of the organic farm in China, and they also have restaurants. But this year they have a lot of rice which cannot be sold this year. So we help them sell the rice, and we also organize offline workshops to help them to teach people about the difficulty of organic farming, and also why the unpolished rice is more sustainable than polished rice, and it's also good for your body. It has more nutrition. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. So here in China, there's a festival called Mid-Autumn Festival. On that festival, we have a lot of mooncakes. We generate a lot of mooncakes. We give it to friends and our relatives, but most of the time we cannot consume them. So we initiate a campaign called Zero Waste Mooncake campaign. We collect mooncakes from our audience, from our consumers, and they send it to us. So you can see there are a lot of different mooncakes there, and we turn them into other snacks by having excellent chef to rebuild them, to recook them. And it was reported by the CCTV news. It was quite successful, and a lot of people say, they should care more about the food waste situation, the food waste problem in China. And we couldn't consume all the mooncakes, so we also donate those mooncakes we received to the local NGOs who deal with food waste. Next slide, please. So far we had some really good results, and we gained 12 million exposure on social media so far. So we get a lot of encouragement from our consumers and also from the PR side. But still, we're still trying to develop this mini app so it can be more functional and people can use it smoothly. Next slide, please. Yeah, here's our team, and yeah, I won't introduce in details. And next slide. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all I want to share with our practice in China. But I have to say that with the experiments of Dojo in China, I see a lot of opportunities here. People do care about food waste issues, and there can be a lot of innovative solutions here. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much, Lorna. And now Martina just signaled me that we also are connected now with Deborah Yi Wen. Deborah, may I suggest you speed up a little bit, please, because our previous speakers had very informative presentations, but they were a little bit long.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Hey, Deborah.
Or good afternoon. Yes, I'm Yi Wen. I'm a Plant Forward Whole Foods chef educator based in Shanghai, China, and very happy to be invited by the Asia Society Switzerland Generation A program this evening. So I'm just going to quickly give a self-introduction and the actions I'm working on in terms of food education. So next slide, please. Yes, so as a Plant Forward Whole Foods chef educator, I'm also part of the Chef's Manifesto Advocacy Hubs member, where we action on 8 thematic themes, which also strive towards the United Nations 17 SDG goals, but with focus more on the 8 thematic themes in terms of actioning on the food selection, reducing food waste, using biodiverse ingredients, as well as plant-forward ingredients and many other aspects. So if anybody is more interested in this area, please go visit the Chef's Manifesto website, please. Next, please. Okay, yeah, so I just wanted to start out by letting everyone know, as a chef educator, it's probably a very niche market because I'm not actually a chef that works in a restaurant or a catering chef, but I can also be referred to as a food designer, as well as an environmentalist, and as well as a service provider for health, educating in the space of food as it has to do with nutritional balance, and as well as the food literacy and climate literacy connection. Next, please. Yes, so tonight's theme is more about the food waste situation. So I wanted to highlight a few aspects on what are the drivers of food waste that I can see as a chef educator on the consumer level. One is more the new developments in consumption patterns in China has shifted more towards, has shifted a great deal. So the relationship with food and the value perception of food has really changed, which is attributable to the increased affordability and convenience or displays of wealth. That's one element that I have seen. And also dietary shifts from a diet more based on plant-based food selections because of the heightened growth in China. More and more is consuming animal products as well as dairy and eggs as well. And the other element I have seen also in increased disposable income. So with busier lifestyles and greater variety of choices, more and more people are actually dining out and actually losing the connection of food, where the root causes, where our root food comes from as well. So cherishing food and where food comes from, the whole journey of food. Yes, thanks. Next, please. Yeah. So in this space, in terms of food education, I think it's super, super important for people to understand the food literacy aspect. So again, in terms of forums, I also educate on, that ugly veg are not are delicious and nutritious as well. So I'm also invited to certain forums where I work with chefs and also educate people on different culinary aspects, as well as the insights on the nutritional value and how to reduce food waste in terms of using the whole vegetable, because food is actually also divided into energetics of food, the yin and yang aspects. So if we're just eating, for example, carrot, the root, we're not eating the top. So we're actually not eating the yin and yang parts of the balanced vegetable. Okay, next, please. Yeah. And recently, I also worked with ProVeg, invited to talk about the profitability of waste with the World Chefs Association, where I showed a few tips on how to reduce food waste. For example, we can use different ways to ferment food or quick pickle food, as well as some different culinary arts that I'm going to share later on. Next, please. Yes, and I was also invited by the Good Food Fund as a delegate, where we traveled to Harvard, Yale, UConn, UMass, Google, and CIA, Culinary Institute of America, where we invited 7 chefs from China and taught them about the Plant Forward movement in the food education space in terms of sustainability and also nutritional health.
Sorry, Ewen, may I interrupt?
Yeah, this was a really insightful and eye-opening forum for many of the chefs, because a lot of people actually need to learn the new language of food literacy, understanding the journey of food from nutritional aspect and the whole where it comes from. And we learned many, many key takeaways, which I don't think I'm going to talk about it since we have such limited time, which I've highlighted here. So if there's a recap, everybody can review it later. I already pinpointed the highlights, so next, please. Yeah, so one of the things I think that was quite interesting to me was the nudge theory, using word for awareness. So this is a great example of the nudge theory where, if you put things that are more visible and using words to highlight it, it actually nudges people to go for the more healthier part, which you can also look into from the link I included in the PPT. Thank you.
Ewen?
Next thing. Yes?
May I interrupt you here? Sorry, we already burned through a lot of our time. And
okay.
I'm sorry, I would like to go on with asking you questions because you're all very knowledgeable on the topic. And yeah, we don't have that much time left now. But one more time, thanks all three of you for these very insightful presentations. And one thing that sticks to my mind is basically all of you mentioned economic incentives or how economic possibilities, how wealth changes the behavior towards food. But how has the recently enacted law against food waste impacted on your projects? May you start, Lorna, to answering the question?
Yeah, sure. We actually launched our project after the food waste law. So we don't feel the difference, but we're so glad that at the government level, they care about this problem so much in China. So, and it really gives us a lot of favor because when we introduce our project, we always mention the law. And so we're trying to teach the restaurants or all the business, telling them if you do not care about your food waste problem, you will be penalized. You will be charged extra fee. So that extra the law actually helps a lot for our business development.
How about you, Richard? Has it impacted on your project so far?
So I'd say some food retailers I know, they have been kind of training their teams to stop people from over ordering. And I think that has been growing. I think also in the kitchens, you're seeing that portion sizes are being made a little bit smaller. But for me, the biggest impact of that law was just general awareness. Now, that doesn't mean that behavior has changed much, but there's certainly a lot more, particularly as food costs go up, a lot more awareness about the individual's role at the table when it comes to food and food waste. And that the less they waste, the more economical it is, but also just the easier it is for the market to deliver. So I think you're seeing it on kind of two sides, the retailers themselves and then the general consumer awareness. But a huge shift, has not happened yet, but it's setting the stage for that.
And how about you, Ewen? I imagine you as a chef educator, you've seen plenty of kitchens all around China, possibly. How have you seen the impact of the food law in restaurants, in kitchens specifically?
Yes, I think the practice of mindfulness is one thing that has, that needs to perpetuate on the education part. I think, for example, I think more people are mindful more about reducing their ordering part, but and also about taking things away. But then when you take away food, then you also increase the plastic waste. Instead of bringing your own takeaway, bags or whatever. So what I see is that, it's something that has been implemented by the government, but there's no action plans. So I haven't really seen many actions actually on my part. I think at the core root of all this is about people understanding more about where the food comes from, all the resources that's put into it, how much love and labor and all that And at the end, I think the most important thing is that there needs to be an implementation plan and action plan, which I have not seen it implemented in restaurants, even though they put the sign up that there's a fine and this type of thing, but it's not implemented, or there's no action plans.
Okay. And you also mentioned mindfulness a few times, especially when it comes about mindfulness towards sustainability. When I think about sustainability, I mainly think about energy sources or means of transport. How do you guys think that the awareness for sustainability, the mindfulness, can be raised? How should we go about that? Whoever wants to answer first.
Silence. So I will just come back down to economics. If you want to drive mindfulness at the massive level, food or any resource in that respect, the more expensive it is, the more considerate you are, the more you value that resource, the more you're less likely to be wasteful or inefficient or, develop obsolescence of any sort. You're going to be able to drive consumer habits as well as industrial habits. So for me, honestly, I would love to believe that we're all going to come together and really on a spiritual or, on an ethical framework, make the shift. But I struggle with that one. I still think economics is the main way, and you can really show that when the price jumps 30%, that demand drops 40%. But it's really hard to see through awareness campaigns and that, yes, there's markets and there's movement, but to make the massive shift that you want, mindfulness to me comes down to economics and to value of whatever it is you're trying to consume.
How about you, Lorna, or Ewen, if you want to answer first?
Yeah, Lorna, go ahead, please.
Oh, I totally agree with Richard. I think economic incentives is super important.
So you stress the importance of economic incentives. So are these incentives more important than the legal incentives coming from anti-food waste laws, or do they have to play together to reach the goal, or how do you see that?
Of course, they have to. I think they really have to play together. But the political incentives more. I can't say more important, but sometimes people have to do it because of the political law. But economic incentives can really change people's behaviors. What I want to address is for developing circular economy, especially here in China, most of the time people only think about sustainability and our planet, but that's good, but we also need to think about the pain points of consumers, what they really want, the user needs, and how the market says your solution will work in China or not, on the market or not. So for people who care about sustainability and who want to develop circular economy, we really need to think both sides, which is good for the earth and good for the consumers, for the market. That's what I want to address here.
Yeah, so for my part, I would suggest more on the education part to map out the whole supply chain, the value chain, that type of thing, and get all the actors involved and where are the bottlenecks, that is driving such food waste situations. So my point of view would be more on the education part and mapping out and addressing the bottlenecks.
Okay, thank you very much. I would have many more questions for you, but as we're running out of time, I'll open the Q&A. If you... Okay. Should we start, or should I go on with some questions? Okay. So, Ewen, Richard previously mentioned that meat consumption is very high in China, and according to The Guardian, China consumes about 28% of the world's meat. How do you go about, as a chef educator, to reduce that enormous meat consumption, and how big of a challenge is it in terms of, I mean, this less meat consumption would also further sustainability?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, in China, we never really ate much meat. It was mainly for celebrations, but because of the past 20 years of the evolvement and growth, that's how people connect the meat and wealth aspect. So to reduce the amount, I think at the end, people actually need to learn more about science-based reports that have actually come out. The past, I think 2018, there's more and more reports that has linked meat with chronic diseases, and all the chronic diseases that's actually happening here in China is all linked to at least 70% linked to the dietary habits of the shifts from the West, and as well as understanding, maybe not understanding that actually a lot of the meat consumption that is people don't really understand the true cost of food in terms of factory farming. A lot of the meat consumption, dairy, eggs is all industrialized. So that is also linked to many, growth hormones and many things, antibiotics, etc. So other than nutritional aspects and also the whole factory farming situation and those aspects, I think that is still very hidden. So again, I address that back to the education part. And as a chef educator, my main mission is to get people to love plants, plant forward choices in terms of biodiversity, culinary creativity, making them flavorful in different ways of cooking, in different condiments and different ways of mixing and matching. There's so many ways to get people to love vegetables, but it's a step-by-step progress because it's not an overnight work. It takes time and more experiences, more education, more advocacy work as well. And public policy is a big thing that we need here as well, the government support.
Okay, thank you very much. So now I think it's really time to open up for the Q&A. From my side already, thank you very, very much for these insightful presentations and answers you gave. Are there questions from here in the audience, in the live audience? Yes?
Yes, thank you very much. My question is directed towards Luona and Ewen. And I was wondering, you gave a lot of insights on your enterprises and the impact that they have. And I was wondering if you, in the future, see your enterprises having also a broader impact with food redistribution across China in general, from areas of great food wealth and overproduction to areas where people are living in relative poverty, nutrition-wise. Do you see that as being solved more by state intervention and an extension of the overall assistance structure, or do you think that your enterprises can also have an impact there?
Who wants to go first?
Lorna.
Great question. I think we are still trying to, we're still at the experiment stage. We still need to, because we're going to launch our new feature next week, and which is people can actually reserve food on our mini app. So not that we're not at the stage to grow this app. We have to try it out to see if restaurants want to cooperate with us. They are the key stakeholders for us at the moment. And saying about the regions, in China, the situation is different because for Chinese cooking, the culture is different. For Chinese cooking, a lot of food is made on site. They don't have a lot of waste issues. We chose to start from Shanghai because there are a lot of bakeries, just like the city you are in at the moment. There are a lot of bakeries, cafes, supermarkets here. So we would like to start from cities like Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen, and then we will see if this solution can adopt into other cities. There are so many tiers of different tiers of cities in China, and the situation, the catering industry is so different here. So we need to test it out in the major city first, and then try to go to tier 2 and tier 3 cities. That's our strategy, but I will know how it goes in the future.
Ewen, do you want to add something to that question? Otherwise, we would go on.
Yeah, for my part, I think we have to educate the consumers. Then consumers will demand the producers to produce what is more healthy and sustainable. So my add-on would be educating the consumers. Then the consumers can demand for more healthy and sustainable production of more sustainable, healthy, and biodiverse type of food selections. That's what I would add on.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. Do we have another question from the audience?
I have a mic already, so.
Okay, go on.
That's very reduced. Thank you so much. This was really, really interesting. I think the topic of food waste is really one that is so broad that the best way to approach it is to really think of, circular economy and how everything is impacted, really to come to real solutions. So, I mean, of course, we touched upon a lot of different things, especially on the consumer side and what we can do at the end of the chain, let's say. But I think there's a lot to talk about also on the side, at the beginning in terms of production and the type of legislation that has to be put in place to cover a lot of bases there. So, I mean, when it comes to food waste, there's also the question of health and safety and what that means, because on one hand, there are, I am certainly not an expert on legislation in China, but I know that there's a lot of different laws around the world, for example, that regulate producers and restaurants in terms of what to throw away and what to keep. And I've seen, a restaurant in Italy just throwing away a bunch of perfectly good food because otherwise they would be fined. And there's an issue there in terms of food waste and legislation. But at the same time, on the other hand, where that's completely absent, then, we get to the point where our food creates a pandemic sometimes, right? So what do you think about that, and how can legislation impact or regulate our level of food waste, and at the same time promote a level of food production and distribution that is good for us?
Richard, do you have some insights as a professor in sustainability? Sorry for throwing.
I guess I'll tackle the second half of that, which is delivering. China used to be, the average farm was about 660 square meters in size, so very small. And over the last 20 years, they've been trying to industrialize it primarily because of food safety concerns, but also food economics and efficiencies when it comes to, delivering to a global market. we had a lot of food scandals in the early mid-2000s, where from 2008 to 14, there was a lot with milk and different breads and all kinds of different things. And that drove a lot of consumers to demand higher quality. It led to a lot of improved regulation, and that led to a lot of improved oversight of food processors, of the retailers themselves. And so, yeah, a lot of progress has been made. I think in China in particular, it's a great case for how government regulation can certainly set a great floor whereby industry can stand up and have better practices. But at the end of the day, it's not the solution. It's not the only way. There are many tools at play. And I think, again, the economics of food is probably by far one of the most powerful laws that we don't really talk about on a regular basis, but has probably one of the biggest impacts, because when food gets expensive, what you start to see is people take shortcuts. And this isn't just in China, this is global. And that can have a huge impact on, you know, the quality of food, how it's wasted, how it's used. And just to kind of give you, to tie off the whole idea that the regulation around food waste, you know, the biggest part of that food waste regulation was how the waste would be handled. And they set up an entire reverse logistics system just to take from restaurants and major commercial centers the waste of, or wet waste for food waste. And they started to centralize the processing of that because they wanted to control where that went and also turn that into a new resource. Now, from a food safety perspective, what that meant was the farms no longer had access to this rich nutrient that was freely available from all restaurants. And the reason why was it was just unsafe to be throwing out random food or feeding pigs with the food that was coming out of the cities. You had pigs eating pork, you had pigs eating medicine. You just don't want this stuff back entering your supply chain. So the city set up an amazing amount of infrastructure to handle that. And that's a large reason why they did it. It wasn't just because the food waste is unsightly or unenvironmental, it was a food safety issue. So it's multi-pronged, but I think what I like about being in China and seeing this is how you go from a system that has no regulation, no real guardrails, into something that is quite efficient, invites investment, and improves practice over time.
Thank you very much. Lorna, you seem to be taking notes. Do you want to add something to what Richard just said, or should we go on to one final question from the audience?
From my point of view, because we are the practitioners, actually, there's no law like protecting us, because we are a platform. What if the food goes wrong, and whether it's the restaurant's responsibility or our responsibility? That's always the argument. So we had discussion with our partners like restaurants or brands, but they are very reluctant on this issue because they are so afraid of safety problem here in China. That means that it will ruin their reputation entirely. So we definitely need clear law on the food safety situation. But now, like, we consulted a lot of lawyers, there's no solution. That's what I have to say, but we need to push that.
Okay, thank you very much. So you mentioned it's like a trio of legal incentives, economic incentives, and education, and there has to be work done on all of these three fronts. And I hope with this I also summed up your final thoughts. And once again, I want to thank you very, very much. And I hear there is a Swiss present on the way to your doorstep. So enjoy the Swiss chocolate and have a great day. Thank you very much.